to Art Around the World with Miss Suarez. I am so excited to be here with you guys again. I hope you enjoyed last week's lesson. As you can see, it's posted up there, what we worked on last week. Today, we're gonna learn how to make Matryoshka dolls. I'm gonna be showing you 3 different ways that you can make your own Matryoshka dolls right there at home. Let's get started with option number 1. I'm gonna show you how to draw the Matryoshka doll. We're going to start with the simplest way to make the Matryoshka dolls, which all you'll need for this is a piece of paper, either a crayon, a marker, or a pencil. It doesn't matter which one you use. I'm going to probably use a marker just so that you can see it really easily on my paper. Now, to make this even simpler, if you have a printer at home, I'm actually on the website, there is an attached link where you can get a printout of a template for the Matryoshka dolls. So that could kind of save you a little bit of time if you would like to use that. If you don't have a printer or you can't print the page for the template, that's okay. It's very, very simple to draw a Matryoshka doll. I actually even found a fun way that you can do it with some props around the house. So if you have a small shoe, so this is my 2-year-old niece's shoe, it actually kind of has the shape of a Matryoshka doll. So you can put that down on your paper and trace it to have your outline of your doll. Now, if you don't have any really small shoes at your house and you want to use your shoe, it probably won't fit on the page horizontally, but it will fit on your page if you flip it to be vertical. So you could trace your shoe and just have one larger Matryoshka doll that way. So let me show you what I mean. So that is my rushing nesting doll drawn using a shoe as a stencil onto my paper. And then of course, I didn't do the tip of the shoe rounded. Instead, I just made it flat so that it would be like the real rushing nesting dolls, which are flat on the bottom. You can also just try to draw this freehand. It's pretty much just going to be rounded on the top, like a head, and then you're gonna come in a little bit at the neck, okay? And then the body is just kind of like a rounded oval shape, but instead of finishing the oval at the bottom, you draw a straight line across the bottom. So if it's easier to draw it freehand, you can draw freehand. If it's easier for you to find something to trace, you could do that too. So you want to do, if you're going to do a page with several on them, probably try to make them different sizes. So I have one that's a little bit larger, a little smaller, and then I'm going to make the smallest one here. And now what you're going to want to do is draw a circle for the face in the center of your dolls. Again, you could just draw a freehand circle, or you can find something that you can trace. So you could find a roll of tape, you could find a water bottle that would fit, a water bottle cap, a lid to a jar, anything that would make a good size circle for your doll that you're creating would work. And then you're gonna just get to start designing. So I'm just gonna give you guys some examples of what you can do. I'm gonna start by drawing the scarf around the head. So the scarf, I'm going to draw a little circle in the center, 2 lines going towards the edges, and then these kind of like teardrop or triangle shapes coming down, so it looks like a scarf is tied around my doll's head. And then for the body of my doll, I'm just going to add patterns that repeat. That's important because having a pattern requires repetition. So I can draw, for example, I can break my doll up into different sections, and let's say in one of the sections I want to do flowers. But I, again, want to make a pattern with my flowers. I'm going to draw 1 flower in the center and then maybe 2 on the side. So I'm going to repeat that pattern on the other side. And I'm going to do 2 smaller flowers on this side as well. So I end up with a pattern, a floral pattern for my top section. Now maybe for this center, very small section, I just want to do something really simple, and I'm just going to do dots, and I'm going to do a pattern of filled in dots and empty circles. So I have a circle, dot, circle, dot. Okay, I can make another section and do a different pattern. So the last thing I want to show you how to do on this doll is how to draw the face. Now, if you're using a marker, the thick tip of a marker might be a little too thick to draw the small facial features. So mine happens to have another side, but you could use a pencil or a crayon to draw those smaller objects. So I'm going to start by drawing some hair. Gonna make this one have curly hair. So she has some curls coming down, kind of framing around where her scarf is tied. And then I'm gonna add eyes. You can draw whatever style eye you want. I'm drawing my eyes by drawing kind of a curved line for the eyelid. Then I draw a large circle with a smaller circle inside, and I'm gonna shade that in. So I'm coloring in the larger circle black and leaving the smaller circle in the center, or it's really at the top of the eye. I'm leaving that white. And we've learned about this in art class before, that, you know, if you look into your mom, your dad, your brother's eyes, you're gonna see a little white glare from the light that's reflecting off their eyes. Then I'm gonna add a nose. For the nose, I'm gonna just keep it really simple. I just did, it almost looks like an upside down U. You could draw a U, you could draw just any kind of little curved nose. You could make your nose pointy, however you wanna make it. And I'm going to draw, for my mouth, a nice curved mouth, but then I'm gonna add lips by adding kind of an M on top and a U on bottom, and then I'm gonna give her little cheeks that I can color in a rosy color. So there is my first doll. She's all done. Now I'm gonna do my other ones. She did another one where I have a little bit more detail. You can see I have lots of little lines and designs on this one. And this is actually the one I'm gonna use for showing you what to do next. So now you can start to add some color to your Matryoshka dolls. If you have paint, colored pencils, crayons, any of those things, you could leave your dolls black and white and color in the background of your dolls with those colors, or paint a separate sheet of paper, which I'll show you, and then you can cut out your dolls and glue them to that background. So I'm going to actually show you that example next. If we're going to be using colors that could mix together, our safest bet is to use analogous colors. Analogous colors are the colors that are directly next to each other on the color wheel. For example, yellow is next to orange, so yellow and orange are analogous colors. We can even take it one step further and have three analogous colors. Yellow, orange, and red are all next to each other on the color wheel, meaning the three of them are analogous colors. You can paint however you want to in your background. You don't have to follow a pattern, but I'm gonna go ahead and just do a little simple pattern of colors on my background for my Matryoshka dolls, and you can choose how you want to do your background. Now that my background is done, I'm going to put this piece of paper in the sun so that it can dry quickly. And while I'm letting this dry, I'm going to go ahead and cut out my dolls so that they're going to be ready to glue onto my background. Our Matryoshka doll option number 1 is complete. So if you would like to do it this style, you absolutely can. Remember, you don't have to use paint in the background. You could color your background in with crayons, colored pencils, anything that you have. And if you don't have glue and scissors, it's not necessary to cut them out either. You could leave them drawn on your paper like this, and you could even choose to fill your background in with black and white patterns and designs, or color it in like this. Even though Matryoshka dolls are typically in Russia always female, I understand that maybe not all of the boys in the class are going to enjoy making these girl dolls, so I have another option for you. You can still make Matryoshka dolls, you can still make Russian nesting dolls, but we can make them look like the Avengers. So that's what we're going to be doing next. If you want to make your Russian nesting dolls look like Avengers, we're going to start very similar to the last way that we did our Matryoshka dolls. So we're going to start by doing an outline. I'm going to stick with just 3 to keep it simple. If you want to have more, if you want to do all of the Avengers, you absolutely can. I also want to point out that you don't have to just use the Avenger characters. You could use Disney princesses, you can use cartoon characters that you're familiar with, especially if you already feel comfortable with drawing a certain character, you could easily use them instead. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by drawing the body outlines for all 3, and I chose to do the Hulk the biggest because he's larger than the other ones. Then I did Iron Man and Spider-Man, but you can do whatever characters you want, and I'll show you how to draw these 3. If you would like to do a different character and you don't know how to draw them, what I did, because I didn't know off the top of my head how to draw these, I just looked up a picture of what Spider-Man looked like, Iron Man, the Hulk, and it kind of helped me have an idea of how to draw them as Russian nesting dolls. I'm going to slow it down now as I start to add some details. So I started with Hulk's hair, just adding some kind of shaggy looking dark hair on top of Hulk's body. Then I'm going to do his angry eyebrows. So he is obviously usually angry when he's the Hulk. He's defeating bad guys. So I'm going to give him some pretty intense eyebrows. But I'm going to make his eyes still pretty cute and cartoony. So I did that by drawing a large circle and then 2 smaller circles inside. And of course I colored the large circle black, and then I leave the 2 dots inside white. I'm going to do the same for the other eye. Next, I'm going to draw some, like, you know, when somebody gets really mad and they get those wrinkles on their forehead, I'm going to add those in. I'm going to add little nostrils for his nose, and for his mouth, I'm going to make it kind of like a wiggly kind of grilling smile mouth. That's what I'm going to do for the Hulk. Next, I'm going to add his muscles. I'm going to move on to Iron Man. For Iron Man, I'm going to start with his mask, which is kind of a cool design. So I started just by doing this kind of, it almost looks like the bottom of a hexagon right here. I'm going to add the sides of the mask. Okay, I'm going to add his eyes on his mask and connect them, and then I'm going to add some lines where his mouth of his mask would be. Okay, now I'm going to move on to, now that doesn't really look like him right now, but once you add the colors, it starts to look more and more like him. I'm going to add that power source he has in the middle of his chest. And then we have Spider-Man. Spider-Man, his mask looks like almost like two big teardrops in the middle for his eyes. And we're going to kind of make those darker. Okay, then we're going to start drawing the web design on his mask, on his face, and his body. And that is a little, looks complicated, but it's actually pretty easy to do. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I start by drawing a line down the middle of his face, all the way down to the middle of his face. And then I'm just going to continue to draw diagonal lines away from his face until his whole face is covered with these diagonal lines, right? Then the next step is going to be to, well, I'm going to add a couple more actually, just to make it look cooler. It's going to be to draw small curved lines, almost like little W's or U's in between those lines. So curving lines, this is what makes it look more like a spider web in between all of these. For his body, we're going to draw a spider in the center of his chest. So we're going to start by drawing a little spider head, which is just a little circle. We can draw a little, kind of like a little teardrop for the body. We can color that in after. And then we're going to add the arms. How many arms does a spider have? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to do 4 on the other side, which gives us a total of 8. 8 legs. And I'm going to do the same design that I did for his mask, kind of on the rest of his body. Like the Matryoshka dolls that we did earlier, where I left them black and white and did a colorful background, I actually think for when you're doing a cartoon character, adding the color really helps to make them look more like that character. So I pointed out that my Iron Man here, it's kind of hard to tell what he is, but when I add the colors of Iron Man to him, okay, now it's a lot more obvious that that's supposed to be Iron Man. So I would encourage you for this one, for this version, if you have crayons, colored pencils, markers, you could do this with paint, but it would be really difficult because you're trying to keep the colors all inside the line. So I would really encourage you, crayons, colored pencils, or markers. You can go ahead and color in your characters. And then we're going to do the same thing we did with the other Russian dolls, which was we cut them out and we're going to add them to a piece of background paper. Alright, you can see my finished product of my Russian nesting dolls as Avengers. For our third option on how to make Russian nesting dolls, we're actually going to make our 3D option, which they are going to be actual little figures that we can stack together and unstack. This one does require the most amount of materials, but you can be really creative in what you end up using. For example, if you don't have scissors at home, you can also work on ripping your paper. And if you don't have glue, you could also use some tape or something like that instead. Now you're definitely going to need paper for this one. If you don't have construction paper, remember, you can always use plain white paper. You could color it in or decorate it with crayons and markers. If you don't have any paper at home, I want to encourage you to recycle some paper. You can make this out of newspaper. You can make this out of old magazine pages. You can make these little figurines. You can make these little Russian nesting dolls out of pretty much anything, any sort of paper that you can find. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what our first step is. Our first step is going to be making sure that you have 4 pieces of paper, and you do want them to be pretty close to perfect squares. So you can see I have a really large square. This one is actually 9 inches by 9 inches, so 9 inches long, 9 inches tall, and that makes a perfect square. Then I have a slightly smaller square. I decreased this one by a couple inches, so I think this one is 7 inches long, 7 inches high, which makes it, again, a perfect square. And I used a ruler to cut mine, but I'll show you another technique in case you don't have a ruler, how you can make them perfect squares. This one I did 5 by 5, and my last and the littlest square is 3 by 3. It is important that your paper is not all the exact same size. If they get progressively smaller, like I have here, that's going to help you to make sure that your dolls can actually stack inside of each other and they can kind of go in and out, which I'll show you how to do. Let's say you don't have a ruler, so it's a little bit hard for you to measure and cut your paper to be a perfect square. I'm going to show you another way that you can do this pretty easily. So here I have just a regular piece of paper. If I take that paper and I start to fold it over diagonally, so I'm pretty much making like a triangle out of my paper. I want to line up this corner up here as best as I can to get it right on the corner. Okay, if I do that, the rest of my paper should end up looking pretty even. So I'm going to go ahead and crease that down. Now you can see I just have this extra little piece over here. That's what I'm going to be cutting off. And here is a good point for me to show you, if you don't have scissors, you can make your paper into a square without scissors. Okay, I'm going to press down really hard with my fingernail. I'm going to press down really hard on that line. Then I'm going to fold it the opposite direction. Again, I'm going to press down really hard with my nail. If you have a little bit of water, you're sometimes wetting the paper a little bit, but the more you fold it back and forth and run your nail along it, the more you're actually helping to break apart that paper, so it's going to be easy to rip off. I'm going to do it one more time. My camera's shaking a lot. All right, and now I can pretty easily, let's see. Start to rip that paper, and it's not going to be a perfect line, but it's going to be pretty close. Okay, so I ripped it. This part I don't need right now. I can use that later. And now I have a perfect square that's nice and even. So that is one way that you guys can create a perfect square if you don't have a ruler and if you don't have scissors. So there's that example. Now the last thing I need before I get started is to just draw 4 circles. So I'm going to just use this piece of paper. I just ripped this piece of paper. This is the extra paper that we just cut off or ripped off. I'm going to use this to do my circles. Now you can draw freehand circles, just draw them, or you can find something that's circular that you can trace. So I could do this one as my first one, the inside as my second one. But the important thing is that all of your circles are different sizes. I'm actually going to do this with a crayon. So I'm going to do a large circle, pretty big, a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller, and then my last one's going to be really tiny. All right, so now I have 4 circles and I'm going to cut them out. Once I have my circles cut out, we can go ahead and start making our Russian nesting dolls. I'm going to start with the largest piece of paper first to demonstrate for you. The very first step is to fold this piece of paper perfectly in half to make it look like a triangle. So I'm going to put those corners, line them up nicely, press down. All right, so now I'm going to crease this paper nice and firmly at the bottom. Okay, I have a nice triangle now, so my paper is folded in half to make a triangle. I'm then going to take this corner right here, and I'm going to fold it over till I get to this edge. Now it's not going to a corner, it's just going to pretty much halfway down this side of the triangle. I'm going to hold it there, and then I'm going to press my paper down. I'm going to crease it down. My fingers. I'm going to repeat the same thing now on the other side. I'm going to take this corner over here, and I'm going to match it up to this side of the paper, which now is a corner because I've creased it to make it a corner. I'm going to push that down. This is construction paper, so it is a little bit thicker. It's a little harder to fold. If you have regular paper, it's easier to fold. But, I mean, it's not impossible. It's still very, very doable. Okay, now I have this pentagon 5-side shape. If I go to the top, I can realize I can unfold my triangle. So I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to fold this edge all the way back. I'm going to crease it. And now I'm going to add just a dot of glue in between each one of my flaps, like this. I'm going to glue that side down and this. All right. Now, I do need to still fold this down. So if I pick this up, I can now see, oh, there's a little pocket inside of here. I'm going to tuck this corner down into the pocket. Okay, it's now inside there, and now I'm going to just make sure it's nice and neat out here. Okay, it's done. So this is the back side where I have all the folded lines and you can see everything, and this is where I glued, and this is going to be the front side of my doll. So you can see on my front side it's nice and clean, and I just have a trapezoid. So we're learning about shapes here too. I now have my largest circle, which is going to become my face. So I can first of all color this. If you happen to have crayons, I'm going to color this a skin color, and then I'm going to glue it down, and then I'm just going to take a marker and I'm going to add different designs and patterns until this one is done. my first doll is now done, and you can see that I colored in her skin color. I drew a face, which you can just watch the first option to see a slowed down version of how I did my designs and how I did my facial features and all of that. Again, I want to encourage you to have a repeating pattern somewhere in your design, or some symmetry. So I have a flower on this side and I have a matching flower on this side, so that's symmetrical. I would encourage you guys to just have fun with this, and you can see it's kind of cool because not even trying, you can kind of turn this into a puppet, where you can put your hand in here and you can have a little character like this. Now I'm going to do the same thing 3 more times so that I can show you how they can stack inside of each other. All right, and now we have 4 complete Russian nesting dolls. So you can see I have my largest doll, and if I pull her, okay, I now have a slightly smaller doll, and then inside of her, I have an even smaller one. And lastly, I have a really, really tiny doll. So you can see I did, in my example, I have 4 dolls. You could keep going if you want to. You could do 6, you could do more than that. I think 4 is a good starting point because it gives you enough to play with. I think it's pretty fun that you can actually put these smaller ones on your finger and have like finger puppets, or you could have whole hand puppets, which I didn't even realize when I started this lesson, but I think that's pretty neat. And again, I do realize some of the boys, or maybe just girls, don't really want to make theirs have flowers and rainbows and things like that all over them. So I did do another example of how you could do them as superheroes or Avengers or just guys. So here's 2 that I did. I did Spider-Man, and then this is little Iron Man that can go inside of him. So you can feel free to make your Russian nesting dolls, your Matryoshka dolls, look however you want them to. This would be the closest to what they actually have in Russia. So if you guys remember from the video that they are typically a mother doll, that's actually what the name Matryoshka means. It means mother. So it's like a mother doll with all the babies inside, all her families all tucked up inside, safe and sound. But if you guys would like to just be a little creative and do something a little different, you can also do the superheroes or different characters, cartoon characters, princesses, you know, anything that you can think of that you can put into your Russian dolls, you can absolutely do. But I definitely want you to experiment. If you can make the 3D option, which is this one, to actually have them be stackable, they can kind of be a really fun little toy that you can play with, or just to show off, to keep and show people that you made your own version of Russian nesting dolls, which are called Matryoshka dolls.